This Voice of San Diego podcast is brought to you by Manilatos Nelson Murphy Advertising and Public Relations. MNM is run by Tony Manilatos, Bob Nelson, and Kelly Murphy Lamkin, who bring decades of advertising and public relations experience to businesses, nonprofits, government agencies, and campaigns. MNM bridges the gap between clients and the people whose influence matters most. MNM is a full-service agency that helps clients develop their strategy and launch cost-effective tactics. The firm specializes in public affairs and advertising with an emphasis on media relations, crisis communications, community outreach, coalition building, broadcast, print, direct mail, and digital advertising. Our reporters at Voice of San Diego have definitely heard from Tony and Bob over the years. Tony, Bob, and Kelly are supporters of Voice of San Diego, and you can learn more about their firm at mnmadpr.com. That's mnmadpr.com. Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast, where we make sense of local politics, schools, housing, public safety, the civic issues that impact the life of a San Diego resident. We break it down so you can understand it and make educated decisions.
Everything that goes into our investigative reporting, the journalists, public records requests, the data crunching, and this very show depends on the support of people like you because we're a nonprofit news organization. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to, actually, nobody's listening on Kogo.
No.
I'm Scott Lewis. I'm here with my friend Andrew Keatts.
What's up, my man?
And special co-host today, Sara Libby.
What's up?
What's up, dude?
Have we ever all done the show together? The three of us? The three amigos, as they call us?
I don't think so.
I
The
don't
gruesome
think so.
threesome?
Yeah, the three friends.
That is what they call it.
They're like that. There goes the three friends.
Yeah, we're not on Kogo this week because football started.
Oh.
We got preempted by the National Football League, otherwise known as the National Soap Opera. It's not a real thing. It's just a bunch of fake fantasy drama, in my opinion. Is your family still a Charger family, Sarah?
So we are off the NFL. We've made the decision. It's a boycott. We're all college all the time.
Okay. In on the NCAA.
It's nice when you can separate yourself from any sort of moral issues by latching on with the NCAA.
It's still kind of morally questionable. We're going to support them when they don't make any money and are like slave labor and then abandon them when they really make it.
Yeah, that's true.
But, you know,
that's a good way to look at it.
The atmosphere of college football games is just better.
Yeah.
Feels better,
absolutely.
Like the band and stuff. And
it's electric.
Energy.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion. I don't know. All right. Let's get something out of the way. It's kind of hanging over you, and we want to talk about it, and maybe that can help just move the thing along. So you have had some personal sort of connection to what's going on in the Caribbean Sea and such. What's going on?
Yes, my brother and his family live on St. Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
They did not get off the island.
So the Virgin Islands, that's a territory of the United States. People realize, like Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah, that's the United States. Yeah, they elect people to Congress. They don't vote; they just have an advisory position there. But there is an elected representative from that place in Washington D.C. And they did not get off the island. They had a home that was built, presumed to be structurally sound, well-built house, elevated and built in concrete into a hillside with rebar, and they were given every assurance that it would be okay. Not many communications have come off the island. We did learn that they're okay and safe. Their two little girls have a dry place to sleep, but that's about it right now. The house is gone. All of their belongings were in it, and it's going to be some time before they have any real opportunity to get off the island or any sort of aid can reach them. All roads are impassable, and there's plenty of people on that island that are presumed to be in worse shape than they are. So the most important thing is that they're fine. That's what we learned.
That sentence is really something. The house is gone.
Yeah. and I don't have much more of a narrative to flush out what they went through. I just know that my brother spoke very tersely in his text messages, communicating that he was okay, and that I sensed a real fear, something terrible had happened yesterday. But as I said, the most important thing, that both my brother, his wife, their 2 little girls, and their 2 dogs are okay.
And there's another one coming, Jose.
Yeah, they're with their neighbors now. Got food and supplies and girding for Jose, which is expected to make landfall on Saturday.
And then at the same time, Irma's supposed to go right up the heart of Florida. This is crazy.
It's insane. It's just back to back to back.
And then the West is burning, your home state, Oregon, like some severe fires.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't be, but been a little surprised at how really traumatized and just heartsick everyone is, because it's this, the Columbia Gorge is on fire. It's basically the most iconic part of the state, home to like these beautiful treasures. It's basically like if Yosemite was burning down, what that would mean to Californians. And so everyone's, I don't think anyone I'm close with, they're in immediate danger, but everybody's really just heartbroken.
Well, it's certainly put a theme on the week for the United States. Hopefully we can rally, and I hope everybody's okay. We're all thinking about your family, and let us know any updates. We have our own crisis going on here. We've learned a little bit more about this week. The county of San Diego declared a local health emergency. Now, I watched this hearing they had, and it was really interesting. There's one part where they asked the staff, the county staff, what it means to declare a local health emergency. And they're like, nothing. It doesn't really mean anything. There's no money that comes out of it. Nothing gets mobilized. There's no, it doesn't help get money. It's just an awareness thing. Okay. So that happened.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because, yesterday as I was writing the morning report, I was hunting for someone to explain to me what this meant, and no one did. Yeah. So good to know.
Well, I watched it after I edited the morning report. I watched the hearing last night. And it was fascinating. I mean, they did Wilma Wooten, who's the chief public health officer for the county, Dr. Wooten, she offered a really good summary, and I think by all accounts of people who were there, of what is going on. And there's a lot going on. But let's just get to the heart of this. This is about poop. This is about feces. And there's no getting around it. Let's listen to Dr. Wooten explain how hepatitis A is spread.
Hepatitis A is usually spread when a person ingests fecal matter, even in a microscopic amount, from contact with objects, food, or drinks contaminated by feces or stool from an infected person. Hepatitis A is spread when an infected person does not wash their hands properly after going to the bathroom and then touches objects and or food, or when a caregiver doesn't properly wash their hands after changing an infant's diaper or cleaning up stool of an infected person, or someone engages in sexual activity with an infected person. Hepatitis A can be spread through contaminated food or water. To date, however, we have not identified a specific source for this hepatitis A outbreak.
So we usually see 2 or 3 cases of hepatitis A in the city, in the county, every year. And that's usually from people traveling, coming back with it. But from November 22nd, 2016 to August 30th of this year, not even a full year, there were 398 cases. There was one that she talked about that was even a 5-year-old child who just apparently had not been vaccinated. Now, I checked, and that's pretty common to get vaccinated for Hep A now. And my kids had gotten that vaccination, so that's another tale of vaccination issues. And I got asked on Kogo on Thursday morning about, look, isn't this like something that only homeless people need to worry about, or it's, separate, right? So I watched a little bit more to understand that situation. First of all, that I don't like that discussion. Like, first, they're people, and also like that reminds me of like the AIDS discussion of the 80s. Like it's not something separate or deserved, right?
Absolutely. Although, I was following a little bit the hearing on Twitter, and it sounded like there were folks who testified who said, I live in a house and I got hepatitis. So it really is a public health crisis that affects everybody. It has disproportionately hit the homeless, but it's a crisis, period.
Yeah, so I didn't quite understand this because at the first she says, well, it's mostly homeless people and people who are using illicit drugs or both. And but then later she gave some stats. So let's listen to how she described it.
36% are homeless and illicit drug users, 17% homeless only, 12% illicit drug use only. That represents 65% of the total number of cases.
Okay, so in that breakdown, she had 23% who were neither homeless nor illicit drug users, and that's 93 people. That's not insignificant. And, I don't know, maybe there's not data about them, or maybe they weren't somehow, maybe they still were part of those groups or not. But that's, this is real. And it's just scary. This is a disease that's not supposed to be here.
Yeah. I mean, I used to live right next to Fault Line Park, and if the ways that they're discussing this to be passed, I mean, I walked through that park. I opened the same doors to public, convenience stores and that sorts of things. I think it is probably statistically the case that most people are not at severe risk of catching this, but it also is dangerous to consider it something that is not associated with your life.
Yeah, and it's poop. Like let's just grapple with the fact that we have a disease that's spread through feces, and it's rampant in our city, in the most developed, in a modern American city. It's horrifying.
Well, and I think one of the things that Lisa wrote about this week that is something that we have discussed to a great extent in the office for a while is that this really focuses our attention on what has been a prevailing premise behind a lot of the city and county's reaction to homelessness thus far, which has been to suffocate it, to attempt to suffocate the crisis by not allowing anyone who lives on the streets to feel like they could be there permanently, by providing things like restrooms, which would alleviate their discomfort in the short term, but might make it easier for them to stay in the long term. And I think this is, I'm not necessarily suggesting that we could draw a direct line between those two things, but it does seem pretty clear that this is to some extent a result of a policy whereby the most important thing we were trying to do was send a signal that no one's welcome to stay on those streets for the long term.
And there's a lot of signals. I mean, everything from the way benches are designed. I was surprised that Lisa found even like landscaping tips on the city's website for how to keep people out or away from your home. We saw the incident with the rocks under the underpass in Sherman Heights to prevent people from being under an underpass. Just there's a lot of ways in which this has played out over the last few years, in which the city has sent a really clear message, like, you're not welcome here. Please don't get comfortable.
And I think there's a flaw in it that I want to point out, which is that what most people in those, if you own a business down there or if you live there, people are quick to point out that the adverse effects that they're trying to avoid with some of these measures are real, that people really have committed crimes in those bathrooms. They really have endangered public safety in certain ways. And I don't doubt that that's true, and I don't doubt that that feels very real if you are the person who's dealing with those adverse effects. But the solution to it is more services, to spread those effects more diffusely across the city, not to suffocate them. Because what we're really talking about is just how comfortable a city is at all in the first place. I mean, yes, when you have only 2 public restrooms in all of East Village, you concentrate a lot of activity around them, and then you see a lot of adverse effects from that concentrated activity. That would not be the case if you had 50 bathrooms downtown.
Absolutely. And I think there's also a difference between what can happen on city or public property and, as opposed to like pushing them out into neighborhoods. We had, even just on my street this weekend, an issue with people and campers that people were concerned about. But isn't that what happens when they have nowhere to go, when they don't have a public bathroom to use, when they can't go to a park? You can't charge your phone in Balboa Park. We've heard that maybe that's a thing that people are being ticketed for. You're just pushing them out into neighborhoods where people have to deal with them.
Yeah, I mean, what it ultimately comes down to is there's no escaping the need for a long-term solution, and it would be one thing if this refusal to provide short-term comfort was being coupled with a real, meaningful, long-term solution. But instead, what we're getting is neither.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
That's what bothers me. This could be like a bridge to something happening, something more permanent happening. But when they're making a decision, which I understand instinctually, as you described, that there's a resistance to, we cannot let these encampments become permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Understand that completely.
Yes.
However, not giving them bathrooms has literally spread a disease that is spread through fecal matter, and that seems to have not worked. It seems to have come back and bit us. And so, let's figure out, like you said, let's figure out a way to provide public bathrooms. This is also a bigger problem for San Diego. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been walking around with a child, or not even without. Like, I don't know where I could go. Ocean Beach, you can go to the lifeguard station, or you can go to the other end of the beach.
Or
that's it.
You can beg a business owner.
Yeah, and the businesses are so raw from the experience of people coming there that a lot of them have like, nope, can't happen. And I understand those approaches, but we have to deal with the fact that people have to go to the bathroom.
The refusal to make our city comfortable for homeless people is also an acceptance of making the city uncomfortable for everyone.
Absolutely. I go running every morning through parks, and the bathrooms are few and far between, and the ones that are there are locked.
Yeah.
I mean, the MTS benches that are constructed so that no one can ever lay down on them are also constructed to be uninviting and uncomfortable when you have to sit down and wait for the bus.
Right.
It's the parks that don't have cozy clusters and of trees and little physical features that you could lay down and have a picnic in. Those are taken away as well, because they'll become places for homeless people to live. And again, the solution to this is more of those things, is to spread those things everywhere and have a nice city. Yeah. And instead we're having an uncomfortable, uninviting city that we're just willing to deal with because at least it's uncomfortable and uninviting for homeless people.
Well, and Hep A is just the monster that decided not to play. They don't follow those rules, right? They're not going to get... It's not conforming to that plan. Now, I did want to bring up, you brought up buses. Let's just talk. We talked briefly about this last week, but let's get into this. This Metropolitan Transit Service security official was quoted in an email we obtained about why he was resistant to some of these washing stations being at some of these transit stops, right?
And transit stops, to be clear, particularly in the East Village and particularly in the part of the East Village where these encampments are very large, central, public gathering areas in the middle of these things, which makes them both places where you have a distinct opportunity to intervene in the situation and a distinct opportunity for the spread of the virus.
And yet he has the opposite reaction. Quote, "My only thoughts are that this would probably become a magnet for homeless people to come onto our property."
Our property?
Get out of here.
That is... That is such a perfect encapsulation of the way some people in government think.
Yeah, it's
a deplorable thought.
The transit stops literally are everyone's property because we need everybody to have the opportunity to get around. Like, this is just crazy. Anyway, to use the sink, take a bath, brush your teeth, wash their dishes, etc.
AKA eliminate the cleanliness problem.
Yeah, the fecally contaminated stuff. We're going to, I don't know. He's like upset that they might use it to clean.
Former Voice of San Diego reporter and friend of the podcast, Kelly Bennett, responded on Twitter to that. If we try to save their lives, they might brush their teeth also.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
It's dark. Let's move on to a little more euphoric discussion. Marijuana.
It's literally euphoric in some ways.
September 11th, on Monday, we are going to wrap up the city of San Diego's regulations on marijuana. And I've learned a little bit about this.
Okay.
I've been calling some folks, talking
when
to some
When you say wrap up, you mean this is the last piece?
This is it.
This is the last thing
needed?
So
I was unclear what was actually going to happen because there was a lot of discussion going on. So let's be clear. This discussion on Monday is only about the sort of non-storefront stuff, the manufacture, cultivation, testing, and distribution. So if you want to make edibles, if you're making some sort of medical product, if you're distributing it, if you're growing it, and then there's going to be a huge regimen of like testing. So there's California regulations that are coming forward about adult use of marijuana have a lot of requirements about testing dosage and stuff like that. So those testing businesses are going to be a big deal. And so the question now on Monday is where can those be, and what do they need to get a conditional use permit?
So this is like the upstream business. This is the
supply.
The supply.
Yeah, and so we have a existing moratorium right now. Mm-hmm. And so here's what's interesting. About 25 businesses got a permit, a tax certificate to start doing some of this stuff before the moratorium. So I talked to a guy named Chris Siegel, who's president of the Association of Cannabis Professionals. He also runs a company called Diamond Terp, and they manufacture pills and mouth drops and all kinds of tonics and stuff like that. They do it out of Otay Mesa, and he
doesn't tonic litter. Isn't that a word for fake medicine?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not prescription right now, so whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, it's stuff that's not just the flower of the plant.
That's what a tonic. I'm actually asking for a dictionary definition of tonic. I've interrupted the show here.
I don't know. I don't know, man. He does.
Sorry.
I think the word was tincture. Do you know what that is?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Anyway, so he produces some of this stuff, right? Products out of the cannabis plant.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so this is the kind of guy. So they've been operating, and so we know what impacts are coming from his operation because it's been going.
Okay.
So what they're trying to decide on Monday is a couple of things. One, should we allow that at all?
Yeah.
Shelley Zimmerman, the police chief, rather notoriously got up at the last time this hearing happened and was like, this is the end of the world. There's nothing that locusts, there's frogs falling from the sky. This is going to be the worst possible thing that could ever happen to the city.
Looked unfavorably upon the whole discussion.
Right. So the council rejected her plea to just ban it outright.
Yeah.
So there's the new Shelley Zimmerman option is just to allow testing.
Okay.
Just testing. Not cultivation, not distribution, not any of this other stuff. Okay.
Okay.
That's what the staff recommended. It looks like the mayor went with that.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now the other discussion then is should there be a maximum of these operations allowed per council district or for the whole city?
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with the per council district is there's literally no places in some council districts for them.
Right.
And so some of these
based on where they've set the zoning requirements that it has to be X feet from this and X feet from this and X feet from this, that if you draw a circle around all those things that you eventually cover an entire district.
Right. Now the advocates for this sort of stuff are saying like, no, let's do a citywide maximum And places like Otay Mesa or whatever could have more of these facilities.
Right.
And there's also discussions about like, can they be close to each other? So if you have a dispensary, could you have a distribution thing right next to it?
Right.
Or would it have to be like oddly like 100 feet away, which would be hard because some landlords would allow it, but the landlord next door might not allow it, that sort of thing.
Right.
And are there discussions about what else they can be close to? Schools and daycares and things like that?
Yeah, so should it be 1,000-foot buffer? Should it be 600 feet buffer? And that's a big discussion right now.
Well, it's like, I think the notion behind keeping a dispensary separated from a high school seems pretty clear. The logical underpinning of that discussion seems clear. The idea of a testing location being separate from a school doesn't actually seem to be all that logical to me. Now, it's entirely possible that there's something I'm missing, but unless you could get marijuana from that testing facility, why would you treat it any differently than any other medical testing facility?
Because pot is very scary
Yeah.
and bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's that's part of the talk, right? It's public access. Like if your business doesn't have public access to it, it should be a whole different calculation about what's happening there.
And maybe that's not right. Maybe I'm missing something. But
well, there's worry of like places getting robbed, stuff like that, like that violence that might occur nearby or whatever.
Which also could happen at banks.
Yeah.
Because they have money and people like to steal that.
On the other hand, let's recognize that there's also a consequence to not allowing these businesses in your city. I don't want to shock anyone.
Yeah.
Hold it together here. I don't want to scare anyone. But people are using marijuana a lot in San Diego. It's something that's happening.
That's a thing that has happened.
And there is a demand for that experience, that euphoria.
Yes.
It's happening.
You could measure it, for instance, in terms of, I don't know. You could measure it in a lot of different ways. You could measure it in terms of the people who voted.
Yeah.
Which I want to be clear, that would be a rough measurement because surely plenty of people voted to legalize it without ever caring to use it. But you could also, I mean, we have information on usage rates.
Yeah.
And it's pretty high.
And
People
also
use it.
that there's hundreds of delivery services operating.
Thriving, looking to expand their services on account of the demand that
so
they're
the demand,
experiencing.
so we're seeding here that the demand is there, right?
Yeah.
And so the marijuana will come in. There's storefronts already happening. So the question is, do we want some of these facilities to be nearby or do we want them to be trucked in?
So there's a couple issues there. For one, there's like a basic economic development argument, which is so the legalization has happened. That is no longer in dispute. So now, do you want to provide an economic opportunity to support that industry through these facilities that don't themselves drive demand, or I don't think you could suggest drive demand in any real way. But also there's a discussion that like kind of just circles back to the very basic question about prohibition in the first place.
Right.
Which is, for instance, these manufacturing facilities. There have been a number of stories over the years about dangerous explosions taking place at these manufacturing facilities, places that derive hash oil from marijuana. I think refusing to permit that sort of activity within the city and close to this large population of people that want to use marijuana might not even just push it out to Temecula or whatever other region you can do it. We'll just make it underground. We'll just make it underground and make it harder to regulate in responsible ways and therefore more dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. The concerns are purportedly about safety, but there are safety issues if you push it out and underground as well. Like you have all these people, it's being tested somewhere that you have no control over. It's being grown somewhere you have no control over. It's being brought in by outside entities over whom you have no control.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why wouldn't you, if you are a prohibitionist in this respect and the decision has been thrust upon you that it must be legal, it would seem to me that this is the area that you would want to exert some sort of control, not simply draw a black line around the city and say we don't want these things either.
Well, it's an important balance. Like, yeah, the whole point is to bring an activity. Look, nobody thinks that if you just ban pot all again that everybody'd stop using it. The whole point of this exercise is to bring it into the light, to settle disputes in court instead of in the street, to operate and to enforce and regulate and make sure it's safe.
To get the government a taste of that swet economic activity.
Yeah, exactly. And Mark Kersey, remember, he put that ballot measure up to tax it when it comes up. I think that's the big discussion going on. Are they going to drive up the prices, the trouble too much that it ends up being more economical to continue to run black market stuff? Now, the big black market issue immediately is the delivery services. And these guys are kind of panicking. So there are about 200 to 300, nobody quite knows the exact answer, of delivery services operating right now in San Diego. As it stands, the city's law is that only the licensed dispensaries that exist are the ones that are allowed to have delivery services. They can contract with somebody or whatever, but it has to be associated with a licensed permitted facility. And the reason is, like, look, they want them to have all the security where they store it, the same sort of conditional use permitting requirements that would be into a dispensary. They want that to be in the place where the delivery service is operating as well, right?
Right.
The problem is that there's only 17 of those permitted facilities. So they're going to take 200 delivery services and boil it down to 17. That is going to be an interesting experience to see how that plays out, and whether the gray market or black market delivery services continue to thrive after that, or whether there'll be a crackdown.
Right.
So those guys are going really hard to try to get the council to reconsider that on Monday.
So when you say that that these sort of supply chain regulations are the last bit of regulatory influence that the city has over these decisions, they also are being asked to reconsider a decision that's already been made.
Yes.
And do we have any sense of what the council's,
so none of the council people
take on this is?
Well, I haven't talked to any, and with land use stuff, they're usually reticent.
Yeah. Often overly reticent.
Yeah. My impression
Anybody
is
on the council wants to talk to me about the difference between a quasi-judicial decision and a legislative decision as it pertains to land use, I'd be happy to talk about it. It's actually clearer than you might think. I think they often over-err on the side of caution.
I think that there's very little chance that the delivery thing will get revisited. And I don't know. I think they should maybe think about it. I'm not sure. I think it's a potential problem, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be considered again. And so, look, the real push on the city right now is that moratorium is going to end. And there's a law about those sorts of moratoriums, I guess. You can't just keep it going. And so this, unlike most difficult city council decisions like the vacation rentals and stuff, I'd think they would just punt it. Yeah. But they're not. They can't, because a punt is a decision in this case. It would mean that they could have them everywhere.
Interesting.
So, or at least conforming. So now the last. Oh, sorry.
Well, I want to say one thing. I mean, put it to the table, to the three friends, as we've
three friends.
Let's
talk about
it. Gruesome threesome.
You're right. Is it kind of interesting that no one on the city council seems to have emerged as the person who is really interested in getting marijuana regulation right?
So I've heard that the guy that everybody's looking at is Chris Ward.
Chris Ward. Interesting. That's interesting.
And Georgette Gomez and Barbara Bree to some extent as well.
It seems like they've all kind of dipped their toes in, but no one's really trying to own it, because Kate also has a plan about how, the supply side issues should be regulated.
Yeah, they don't like that.
They
don't like his plan.
Interesting.
So that's interesting. Yeah. So but Kersey's he put the tax up.
Kersey did put the tax up last year. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe everybody's the pot person. I don't know.
But I guess Barbara Bree's really interested in the economic, entrepreneurial sort of side. So that'll be interesting. Anyway, one final point. I was confused before about where it would be legal to actually buy marijuana, like at a storefront. Yeah. Like I thought that was still being decided. That's not. It looks like the 17 licensed places. Now, there's not 17 total that are being built, some of them, but the 17 permitted facilities will be the ones that will be able to go to the state when this transformation happens next year and say, we would like to be the state authorized dealers of these things as well. And so in order to go to the state, you have to have a local permit, and this is the only local permit you're going to get.
That will be an interesting thing to keep an eye on over the next 2 or 3 years, because I don't know if anybody's been to Denver recently, but there are more than 17 places to buy marijuana in that city right now.
Yeah.
Wait, can I make a final point? Final point?
Yeah.
So one thing that seems like it should be a consideration, maybe less of a consideration, I don't know, is that for a council and a city that has purportedly said we are the leaders on climate change, it seems really strange to say, like, we want to push everything out to LA or even beyond and have all of this brought in. It seems like if climate change is really your priority, it should be baked into all these other decisions as well, instead of ones that are just explicitly about climate.
Right. Like, no, we don't want to grow marijuana here. We want to import outside marijuana.
Exactly.
And we don't want to manufacture that imported outside marijuana. We want that to be manufactured elsewhere too. The only thing we want to do here is test the dosage requirement.
Well, there's other consequences
away from schools.
too.
Away from schools.
It's it's not just the footprint of this pollution, but also like it's just dangerous to transport that much stuff. It's also like it's the security hassles are a problem, the cash.
Right.
Yeah, there's no banking system.
Yeah, so it's like it's better in a lot of different ways to have these things like closer. So
which is something that the city's established business community understands very well, and in fact talks about a lot when they talk about, the benefits of having a manufacturing sector in Tijuana that's related to the high-tech industry here in Sorrento Valley. And I don't see why it would necessarily be any different on this business venture.
Well, we'll see what happens Monday. One last point.
This is the sixth last point.
Amanda Chicago Lewis put to word something I've been trying to define myself, and I really appreciate what she did. So she's a writer, used to be at BuzzFeed, covers marijuana, did a wonderful piece for GQ about the effort to sort of patent some of these marijuana strains. So she described in that piece, which I highly recommend, but she described in that piece the sort of different populations of people getting into the business that I've been trying to put words to for a while. Mm-hmm. And she described them in 3 different ways. The outlaws. So the outlaws are the people who dealt and manufactured and did all of this stuff with marijuana when it was illegal, when it was clearly illegal, or when it was partially legal, but just like mostly that they were willing to break the law.
Yeah. Clearly.
And then she says another descriptor are the code switchers. These are the people who, like James Sladek, who I did for that podcast, other people who they understood what was happening in the illegal world, but were working hard to bring it into the legal world. Right? They're the backs on which a lot of these people making money now are standing.
Yeah, because there was this relatively long transitional period where there was medical marijuana, right, and there was a lot of people who were knowingly using it for recreational purposes during that time, and it was less regulated than is just being discussed now. So it was unclear.
You had to, there was legal, but you didn't know, permitting was weird. You had to. There was all these sort of gray areas, literally a gray market.
So she's almost describing a spectrum. You can actually move along the spectrum.
Right. So those are the code switchers, she called it. And then the third is the green rushers. These are people who want to make a bunch of money on it, don't want to touch the stuff. And I think that's a really perfect descriptor of the 3 sort of parts of that spectrum of like, these are people, and you see them a lot. There's a lot of people in town, brokers and investors and landlords and commercial, just that are really interested in this thing happening, but they don't want to touch the stuff. So our hero of the week.
Maybe an unlikely hero is the LA Unified School District. So our friend Ashley McGlone has been trying.
Friend.
Yeah, the 4th friend has been trying, like other staff members, for months and months to get some very basic information out of San Diego Unified, including how many people they employ, which you would think a public agency might be able to tell you. So she's been waiting for months.
184 days.
184 days. So just for kicks, she tried to get the same data out of LA Unified, and without complaint, they provided it in 15 days. So
11 years worth of data.
Thank you, LA Unified.
Yeah, she was seeking staffing counts for the district's different employee groups, teachers, classified staff, and they had it and gave it to her. It's amazing.
It's almost like that's how the system should work.
Our goat of
That was
the
a
week.
low bar, huh? We're just mesmerized that the school
People
district
doing
provided
jobs.
information.
Yeah.
Hero.
It's a tough week. All right. A goat of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
First, do we need to change goat of the week? I'm gonna do a survey to the reader. I keep getting calls and texts and emails and stuff saying goat means greatest of all time, not something bad.
Which is
Now, we cited Charlie Brown otherwise. However, the people, it seems like predominantly from the East Coast, and I know it's Muhammad Ali, all that, but there's something that really took hold in the East Coast more, in my opinion. And anyway, so
whenever Scott doesn't know something, he attributes it to him being like a pioneer living out on the plains and like.
No, I'm
well,
with
like,
the pioneers on this one. It
Yeah.
means nothing to me.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, this was like my first suggestion upon being a Voice of San Diego employee, and so
okay, so I'm going to
it's
put this
finally
call
on
out.
the table.
You can respond to scott@voiceofsandiego.org or at VOSD Scott on Twitter, scott@voiceofsandiego.org, and tell me, we need to change goat of the week to something else, like, I don't know, loser or whatever, right? Like, goat is funny to me. Like,
and also send a suggestion if you want to change it.
yes. So
Also, should we change Hero of the Week to Goat of the Week?
that'd be funny. That would
It would really confuse people.
yeah, you'd be like,
What if we just make them both goat of the week?
Spelled differently, but
Yeah.
no one will ever know because this is an audio program.
Right.
I like that. That's good. Yeah, somebody could be traveling for like 6 months and come back and listen to the show, and they'd be just
Discombobulated.
Yeah. Our goat of the week is Ifton Charter School, the board and management there.
It doesn't seem like things are going well.
Little turmoil.
Yeah.
This is Maya Krishnan had a good piece this week in Voice of San Diego. A raft of complaints prompted San Diego Unified School District to investigate the school. They found problems ranging from special education, people needing special education, not getting it, improper hiring practices. The school denied the findings but wouldn't talk to her for months. San Diego Unified is also withholding funds from the school for much needed renovations. Now they've hired a consultant. They've got lawyers. They're trying to rebuild, but they also mysteriously fired a principal who seemed to be getting some traction and getting some results, and they just haven't been transparent about the whole process.
Yeah, they've hired a consultant and lawyers while simultaneously saying nothing is wrong.
Yeah,
and
nothing's wrong.
There's no problems whatsoever.
Yeah, nothing's wrong. We're just hiring a bunch of people to fix what's wrong. It seems to be the case all the time. Yeah. Nobody wants to admit anything's wrong, ever. Yeah. All right, this has been the Voice of San Diego on podcast, and thanks for joining us this week.
Yeah, that's it. We don't have to say goodbye to the radio audience.
The three friends.
Just the 3 friends. This is when the 3 Friends theme song plays.
The show you just heard was part of the Voice of San Diego podcast network. To hear other great shows like the Voice of San Diego podcast, I Made It in San Diego, a show all about the people behind the region's businesses, The Kept Faith, a San Diego sports show, the binational Curacaos podcast, Startup Vault, the San Diego Beer Talk Radio, and more, please visit voiceofsandiego.org/podcasts. If you'd like to sponsor any of the podcasts, please email Aaron at voiceofsandiego.org. That's ERIN@VOSD.org.